So, as a horror writer, I've written a lot of scary stories. And one topic that I haven't really covered yet, though, is AI. And when I think about AI, and when most people think about AI, you think about the Terminator taking over, your fax machine coming to life and sucking you in and faxing you off somewhere or something. You think about all these like fantasy, these sci-fi type of things. And in reality, that's not really why we should be afraid of AI or worried about AI, I should say, because I think afraid is too strong of a word. And it's something that we really need to focus on and talk a little bit about because there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of issues that we're going to see over the coming years when it comes to AI. And it's not the takeover of humanity that we should be worried about. It's humanity destroying itself. All right, so AI is one of those topics it's it's covered in a myriad of different ways, and it's something that's kind of frustrated me over the past probably year or so. Is trying to find a way to really talk about it in a way that makes sense, in a way that translates to most people, because I think for most people it can get really complex really fast. And we're not going to be covering like how AI works or what a large language model is or any of that kind of stuff. What we're mainly going to be covering here is how AI is developing and what the potential of it is, and then what humanity might do with it. And those sound like they might be the same, but they're really completely different things, at least in my opinion. So last year I was doing a podcast series that I really should pick back up, but I haven't really done in a while. It's County Road 189. It's here on my YouTube channel. You can go and listen to it if you'd like to. But it was basically covering just topics that were on my mind, having to do with writing and horror stories. I was sharing some of the stories I was writing over the course of the year. I was sharing on the podcast and just talking about them and where they came from and all that kind of stuff. And part of one of those episodes was actually talking. I wrote a story. I wrote a short story, and then I had AI write a story on its own. ChatGPT I used. And the question that I posed to the listeners was, which story do you think was AI written, and which story do you think that I wrote? Now, a number of people probably couldn't have told the difference. There were some people that I think were able to kind of figure it out. If they knew my writing style, they might have been able to pick up on my details over what the AI did, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, the AI written story, just out of the gate as it was pretty decent. It was very formulaic, very formulaic, but it was a pretty good story. And so it kind of got me thinking, like, how long is it before artists are replaced by AI? And, now you've got AI that can write songs and record the vocals to those songs and the backing tracks. AI can create an entire song all on its own, right? You have AI, all of these different picture things where you can go and you can generate a picture and you can tell it, this is what I want to have and this is what I want you to put out, and then it'll put out a picture and you can tweak the prompts and that kind of stuff. So there's all of these different things that you can now do with AI that are kind of replacing what traditional artists have done. And the argument up to this point from traditional artists and even writers, I can say I've made this argument in the past, is, we can't keep up with AI. And not only that, it's just regurgitating stuff. It's just taking what it already knows. It's taking the training data, the pictures, the stories, everything that's been fed to it, and it's using that to put something else out. But in reality, the more I think about it, the more I realize that, yeah, that's kind of what human artists do as well. Yeah, we take things that we've learned, our life experiences, and with AI, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have life experiences per se, but it does have experience as far as what it's being fed, training material. And it takes all of that and it will make something out of that. Now, some of these programs are better than others. There are programs that will just take pieces of other images and put them all in one image and call that original. But realistically, humans could do that now with Photoshop, and humans have done that. I guess the real question comes to, where do we draw the line? Should AI be allowed to own a copyright on something? Where do the royalty payments go? Do they go to the creator of the AI that did it? It gets really complex really fast. And I personally think that honestly, we really need to be focused less on who gets the royalties for the art and more on where do we want the art and what's important to us as individuals from art. So for me personally, if I want a nice picture, a nice something to hang on my wall, now I'll go out and make my own. I've got my own images. I've got got an image back there. I've got a couple images hanging over here that I took. I'll put my own images up on the wall. But for most people, they'll be shopping at like Walmart or they'll go to a flea market or something, and they'll find a picture there, right, that's been painted, and they'll put it up because it looks pretty. They don't really think too much about the art. Now, artists in general typically tend to think more deeply about it, and there are people out there that appreciate art for what it is, and they'll think about, what was the artist thinking when they created this, and what was the intention. But most people don't really think about it when they see a picture. They're just like, "Ooh, that looks really good." They don't delve deeper into it, and so it becomes, what do we need to do to kind of balance out this issue? Because right now, the situation that we're running into, and it's across the board, whether you are a musician, a singer, a painter, a photographer, a writer, whatever you happen to be doing that's art based, you're at risk of being replaced in the not too distant future. Now, the only thing that would kind of cause some of that to be in limbo is the whole copyright thing, because if a company creates an image to use in its marketing material using AI, that can't be copyrighted, which means that they can't own that, right? But they can still employ logo makers and people that can make that kind of stuff by hand, and then that person can copyright it. So there's steps that we are moving towards that as a thing. And it's terrifying, especially because I'd like to make a living selling books. I want to make a living on YouTube. That's what I'm working towards. And it's a scary thought of like, am I going to have to compete with these things? Am I going to have to compete with somebody who's pumping out 15, 20 books a week when I'm pumping out one a year maybe, or one every few months? And the answer is yes. Unfortunately, that's the direction we're going. And the sooner we accept that, and the sooner we start focusing on what's next, the sooner we can really kind of clamp down on figuring out our future. Because it's not just art that's in danger, right? A lot of people talk about, tech jobs, especially tech jobs. They are the first ones in line because it takes a very specialized hand to do a lot of this tech stuff, or at least it has until this point. And now, if you can just program, you can have an AI come in and build your servers and run your programs and run all your backend stuff and your databases and all that kind of stuff. Well, do you need people for it anymore? Maybe you need, 5% of the staff that you used before just to kind of monitor things and make sure things stay on track. But why do you really need that many people? You don't, not anymore. It makes me kind of think. Back when I was in IT, I was a systems engineer back in the day. I was working on Windows systems specifically. And we had a server migration where we moved the entire company from Microsoft, the on-premises mail, Microsoft 2010, and we changed the Exchange server to the newest one, which was 2016 at the time, the newest mail server, right? And that was a complete mess. It was a pain in the ass to get all of that done. But when we finally got it done, one of the kind of flaws in the system was we still had to put people in because of another system that we had. We had to put people in the old mail server when they started with the company and then migrate them over to the new mail server. And there was an entire process that was involved with that, where the person handling the new hires had to bring over all of the information to our team, and then we had to manually put everything in and then manually run a batch to move everybody over. And I'm the kind of person that's like, hey, if I can automate it, I'm going to automate it. So I wrote a script that did all of that for me. I mean, literally, I had the guy that did the new hires put the names and some basic information in a spreadsheet, and every night the script would run on its own and do all of the work for me. I didn't have to lift a finger. I took what was essentially 10 to 15 hours worth of work a week and whittled it down to nothing, a script that ran every night on its own. And all I had to do was a little bit of cleanup work if there was any issues. And that's kind of indicative of what we're facing with AI, because there's a lot of people out there like me, especially in tech, that are like, well, if I can automate it, I'm going to automate it. And companies don't realize it, because companies typically, while they say that they're paying you to do work, they want you to do a specific job. And as long as that job gets handled, they'll usually stay off your back, right? Well, if they can automate all of that, and if they find out that, oh, we can just bring in this piece of software that's going to eliminate 90% of our staff, all of a sudden, you don't have a job in tech. And I don't care what that job is, whether it's something like security, governance type of stuff, where they're monitoring for threats and hackers and that kind of stuff, or it's building servers or setting up new hires. Like, I don't care what the job is. It's on track to be automated completely. People don't like to talk on the phone. We had a call center at the same company, and people would call. They had to call in. They had an automated system, but nobody really knew how to use it. But so you had to really kind of call in if you had an issue. But people, time and time again, they hate waiting on the phone, and they've said that I would prefer to just fill out what's wrong on a, on a screen, on a form, and then you can give me a solution, or somebody can come and help me, right? It's moving more towards that. And that's the future. And it's not just tech. Driverless cars are still a ways out, but there's a lot of stuff that, like, Amazon's using automated machines that will go from shelf to shelf and pick orders and that kind of stuff. It's coming along. And 10 or 15 years from now, we're going to be in a state where there's going to be a lot fewer jobs for people, at least as far as the jobs that are available today. And that's just going to keep dwindling over time. But there's a problem. Because you see, we live in a capitalist society. And capitalism, the entire idea behind it is that you can start a business and you can grow that business. And if it's a good enough business, it'll take off and you'll make millions of dollars, right? In practice, that's not really how it works. The rich get richer, and even a great business idea, even something that's outstanding, gets lost in the sea of other ideas, right? But we kind of run into a problem, because what's going to wind up happening with these companies is they aren't going to be needing to employ as many people, which means fewer people are going to be making a living wage, which means fewer people to buy the products and services these companies are offering. That's where we get into a pickle. Because if the goal isn't to make money anymore, what's the plan? What's the purpose? Where do we go from there? The idea of a universal basic income has been floated, and it's not a bad idea. But again, that money has to start, it has to come from somewhere. It's just a circular system at that point. What's the point of having money at all if you're just paying a bunch of people to do whatever they want so that they can spend money for companies, for CEOs and executives to make themselves feel better? Because at the end of the day, that's what it really boils down to, is these CEOs, these executives in these companies, these board members, they feel special. They feel good about themselves because they can make the numbers bigger every year. Realistically, there is only so many people as a target market for any business, right? So there is a hard cap for any business for what you can do. And once you get close to that hard cap, you never actually hit the hard cap. There's very few businesses that ever actually hit their max capacity. Like they have no other customers they can possibly pick up. But once you start to trickle up and you kind of get close to that cap, you wind up in a situation where, how do you make the numbers bigger? And it only makes sense. It only feels good if the numbers get bigger every year. So they invented inflation. They invented this idea that the money is worth less every year. Therefore, our products are worth more every year, which means our totals can go up every year. And that's how they continually make the bigger numbers. And the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But what happens when that money doesn't really matter as much anymore? When you take away the value of that money as a whole, and sure, they can go out and you can buy luxury services and stuff like that, but like, there comes a point where that money doesn't really make that much sense. And what this kind of brings me back around to is that it's not really about the money. It's about power. And that's where AI and the human experience and how humans are going to use AI is going to really kind of kick us in the ass, for lack of a better phrase. Because sure, it's going to wind up we're going to wind up probably automating most of the heavy tasks, most of the difficult stuff that nobody wants to do. We'll wind up automating most of that. And I don't see us winding up in a dystopian future where, everybody's living under bridges, that you have the really dystopian movies where like it's 2045 and all of the cities are just full of vagrants because nobody can afford to live anywhere. I don't think it's going to wind up being that because it really doesn't make any sense to go that far. And realistically, these people, these CEOs, these executives, these people at the very top, they're not actually chasing money. See, they don't care if you have a house or utilities. They don't care that if you can afford food or clothes, or they don't care that you can afford that kind of stuff. They're happy that you can have that kind of stuff. What they care about is the fact that they're powerful, that they're looked at as powerful. And a lot of that has to do with just the fact that, like, it's an ego thing. You get to that position because you have an ego. You're driven to get to that position. Makes you feel better to grow your paycheck every year, or to grow, your job title, get a higher job title every year. And you feed that ego until you get to a certain point, and then you got to find some other way to do it. And the only other way to do it is by being able to sit around with your other powerful friends and talk about who's the most powerful. It's a I don't think it's a real dick measuring contest, but it's about as close as you can get. They might be whipping them out. I don't really know, honestly. But that's where we're going. It's a terrifying thought, and I think getting back to where I started this all with from the artist perspective, I long for a day where I don't need book sales in order to pay bills, where I don't need Patreon or ad revenue or any of that kind of stuff to pay my bills. I long for a day where I can do all of this stuff, where I'm providing a form of entertainment. I'm providing, because I think there's a lot of people out there that would just love to be able to do that. Go contrary to popular belief among some in this country, it's not that people don't want to work. It's that people want to be able to do what they want to do and still have their basic needs met. And I think that's just kind of the human condition. If you ask most people, what would you do if you didn't have to work? They'll tell you maybe they want to travel. Maybe they want to go to parks. Maybe they want to have a YouTube channel, write books. Maybe they want to, there's a million things that people might want to do that they're just held back by these jobs. And if we can get to a stage of society where we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, that would be fantastic. I want people to read my books. I would give away my books to everybody that I possibly could if I didn't have to worry about the money. I wouldn't be so stressed about making YouTube videos, and I would go out and the majority of the content on my channel, if I didn't have to worry about money, the majority of the content on my channel would be the Legends and Tales stuff that I used to make because I loved doing that kind of stuff. That's the thing is we are restricted in the current way that we do things. And I think AI gives us a door to possibly get past that, to move forward through that. But it's what's going to happen at the top and what the people that have the power are going to do when we wind up in a society where money doesn't matter as much. And that's what I want to keep an eye on over the next few years, how we evolve and how legislation evolves and how we handle this. Because realistically, we're already seeing people getting laid off. Companies have been laying off a shit ton since 2020. And a lot of that was over hiring, but some of that's because they're starting to figure out new ways and more efficient ways to do things. And companies are starting to kind of realize the potential of AI, which is why companies like Google and Microsoft and these big players in the game are getting in there, and they're really trying to develop it, and they're really putting money into it because they see it as a way that, well, we can free up a lot of capital if we don't have to pay salaries anymore. And that gets us right back to, well, what's next? And I hope that what's next is that we wind up in a society where we don't have to worry necessarily about money anymore, where things can get done and things can get taken care of. And maybe we have a pool of people that continue to take care of things. I would not mind a scenario where you have like the ultra powerful, the people up here who it makes them feel really good because they're, they can lord over a bunch of people. and then a class of people in the middle that are, maybe have a few extra benefits because they help to kind of keep the AI stuff running in the background. And then everybody else just kind of gets to make art and travel and see the world, because we're only here for so long. And it's a shame that most people won't get to see the Grand Canyon, that most people won't get to see the pyramids. It's a terrible tragedy, the number of people that won't get to see the Great Wall of China or travel and see the history of the castles of Europe. Those kind of things should be open to everybody. And, it's the idea of a utopian society, but it'll never be utopian in the sense that we'll still have to provide in some way. We'll still have to have, there will still have to be some kind of basic infrastructure there. And, maybe eventually we get to the point where 95% of everything is all automated and we can just lean back. We still need to keep up with some of the skills and stuff. It's a shame to lose the skills that we currently have, because what happens when that stuff goes out? Nothing's perfect. Systems break down. But realistically, I mean, if you take out the need for money, if you take out the need for all of these things that currently drive, think about hackers and criminal activity and that kind of stuff. A lot of that's driven by money and power. And if money's no longer a thing that you can get, if hacking into bank accounts or stealing people's identities no longer nets you any, if money no longer gets you power, those things, nobody's doing them anymore, because why would you? These operations pop up because of money, because these outfits are trying to make easy cash. And if that's not a thing anymore, they go away. You'll always have those people that are just malicious and just do things to hurt because they want to hurt. But the majority of it's not that. The majority of it is out of necessity. So maybe that's the actual ideal society we get to someday. And maybe AI helps us get there. So I guess the moral is, don't judge AI for what it is today. Don't see it as something to necessarily compete against. Because at the end of the day, people are going to look at, they'll look at two books on a shelf. And one might be my upcoming book, GPS Signal Loss. Got to plug that. It's coming out at the end of April. And one might be an AI written book. And maybe GPS Signal Loss just sounds cooler. So they pick that one up off the shelf. And maybe they don't have to pay for it because money's not a thing anymore. So they pick both of them up off the shelf and it won't matter. So that's all I got for this one. I just kind of wanted to explore the topic of AI from a different perspective and look at it from I've been kind of hostile towards AI. I've used it. I've played around with it. I've been infatuated with it in a way, but I've also been kind of hostile towards it. Like, am I going to have to compete with you? What's going on here? And I think that won't be quite as big of an issue, especially because if money's not a problem, if we can overcome the thing of money, most of these people that are creating this art in droves and writing these books that they're putting them on Amazon for sale, they're doing it because they're trying to make a quick buck. If that's not a thing anymore, they're not even going to be bothered to do that either, because they aren't doing it for the passion. They aren't doing it because they want to create something. They're doing it because they're trying to make some quick money. And, so maybe that competition is not really what it looks like it's going to be today. So I want to thank you all for watching. You can go check out the Patreon if you want to support me. I mentioned that earlier. Unfortunately, I still rely on the goodness of strangers like you to check out my Patreon, to buy my books. I've got, like I said, I've got 2 books out. I've got another book on the way. GPS Signal Loss is coming out October. Wow, no, April 26th. So I've got that coming out, and I've got a lot of really cool stuff coming up in the future. So subscribe to the channel, maybe. Check out some other videos. Go check out my older stuff. I've got a whole bunch of different content on here. If you can name it, I've probably I've probably done it except for like mukbang. I don't do mukbang. I'm not gonna ever eat on camera. That's most other things I've at least attempted because I'm curious, right? So thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. All those little